and they're trying to catch anybody with the slightest trace of cannabis in their system because we have really cooked drug driving laws.
It's been a while since we've spoken to Senator David Shoebridge from the Greens. He is the Greens spokesperson on defence, but also he has a lot to say about the budget. I'm kind of almost budgeted out, but just when you think you've heard it all, and by the way, the two most outspoken politicians in the country, the Prime Minister and his Treasurer, still haven't been able to successfully explain the nuances of this budget to Middle Australia. And the opinion poll that came out on Monday shows that the electorate are either really upset about what's perceived as lies, or it's now slowly sinking through with osmosis that this budget holds a lot of hidden surprises for a lot of Australians. Senator Shoebridge, welcome back to Bonafide.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to be talking.
I know you're really busy. You've got committee meetings to run to, but look, there's a bit to get through this morning. The news today at the recording of today's podcast is that a bloke that's being described as Anthony Albanese's golden boy, the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns, he's turned. And he's today absolutely slamming the budget. He's criticised the federal government over a lack of action, and I've been saying this for ages. When you talk about tax reform, we've got to address bracket creep, where people who for a while now have been in a higher tax bracket, but because of inflation, they don't have any more money to pay towards bills or petrol or food or anything else. And if you try to get ahead, and Senator, this is the perception, the feedback I'm getting, that if you really want to try and get ahead, maybe get a second or third job, it puts you into that higher tax bracket, but you still have nothing to show for it. Addressing bracket creep. Now, days after the pledge by the government to fix taxes, and Angus Taylor saying he wants to fix taxes, Minns has really done a 180 on his own party today. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you wouldn't want to be part of a team with Chris Minns on it. That's my first thoughts. You know, you'd be constantly looking behind you, looking over your shoulder, wondering he's going to stab you in the back. But like, if Chris Minns was serious about nurses, about frontline workers, well, he would have given them a pay rise that meets inflation. I mean, that's a bloke who, as Premier, has been desperately trying to ensure that nurses, paramedics, frontline workers don't even get a pay rise that meets inflation in New South Wales. And now he's coming out and whacking his own colleagues. But I will say this, you know, I talk to people all across the country and they say, why are they paying a higher tax rate on their work? Like, they can be working, as you point out, you could be working 50 hours, 60 hours a week, and you're paying a higher tax rate on the income you earn from work than some wealthy investor is paying on their share portfolio while they go to sleep at night. And I think if you want to look at where the inequities in our tax system are, you know, why should somebody who inherited a share portfolio from their dad pay less tax on the income they earn from their share portfolio than a nurse who's working 60 hours in a public hospital, or somebody working 3 jobs in Western Sydney trying to pay the rent? And if Chris Minns was serious about those kinds of cost of living issues, well, first of all, the bloke could pay nurses a proper pay rise. He'd give teachers a pay rise that meets inflation, and he refuses to. And secondly, he put some pressure on his federal colleagues to ensure that we're taxing wealth, not work. Because I hear the same thing. People working themselves ragged and, you know, wondering how they're ever going to get ahead. And they're paying off a HECS debt sometimes that his mates in Canberra have whacked on them. So, yeah, I get the frustration that people are having. Like, bracket creep is a small part of what is a system that is completely cooked, where we tax people's work at a higher rate than we tax wealth earned from people's, you know, capital and savings.
Okay. I wanted to talk about incentive to work. And there's been a massive pushback from the small business community. And you've seen the memes. We've all seen the memes. You know, AI-generated photos of the Prime Minister at a hairdresser's or whatever. Oh, look, I've got a silent partner. Anthony Albanese owns 47% of my business. I don't know whether that's mischievous or misleading.
Well, I don't think, I mean, there's still a capital gains tax concession. So whoever's putting the 47% out is, you know, either being, you know, accidentally misleading or deliberately misleading. There's still a capital gains tax concession. And even under these new rules, capital gains tax won't be paid on any capital gains that meets inflation. So, and I think we should have a serious look at what's actually in this budget on capital gains tax and negative gearing, right? Because we've had a lot of discussion about how this is some sort of intergenerational equity budget. And I'll be honest, it's not. It's absolutely bloody not. There's nothing in this for young Australians. And so when I hear young Australians worried that they're going to be paying higher tax on what they're doing, whereas older Australians who have got huge amounts of savings, and not everyone does, but overwhelmingly wealth is skewed towards older Australians in this country, they get to grandfather and keep all of their benefits. Well, the young Australians say they're going to get whacked if they buy a house. They're worried they're going to get whacked if they do a business. I understand why people feel like, there's nothing in it for them, because there isn't.
Okay, but older Australians who have worked hard all their lives, paid taxes all their lives, if they have a house and they have equity in it and they want to make sure that their kids get a fair share of what they've worked for, paid tax on, are they being...
Still no capital gains tax on the family home. So that's completely excluded. There is no capital gains tax. So if people are running that scare campaign, that's actually not part of it. And older Australians who own multiple properties, investment properties, they've been grandfathered, right? They keep all of their existing tax benefits. It's young Australians who are getting nothing out of this budget, because they're not going to get any of those tax benefits, and they're also not going to get public housing built. They're not going to get social housing built. They're not going to get any haircut on their HECS. It's young Australians who are really being strung out on this one.
Senator, every government is saying we've got to address the housing shortage problem and being able to negative gear a new house. I get the idea behind that, but every tradesman I've ever spoken to has said, I can't find an apprentice. The future of the building industry is in dire straits. And as you know, we address the trucking industry on this program as well with Rod Hannafy, and truckies are leaving.
I'm hearing the same. Like, I'm hearing particularly the trucking industry. It's already bloody tough. Margins are really low. The fuel price increase is really sort of pushing people to the edge. I've always been a champion for the trucking industry about there's some rules in New South Wales which allow for contract determinations, actually fair payments to be made for the trucking industry. I believe those contract determinations should be able to be covering the entire country. There's a small amount of it at a federal level, but I get it from the trucking industry, and I feel their pain. Like, that job, you're working 60 hours a week or more, sleeping on the side of the road, and now you've seen your margins being whacked by fuel price increases. Well, maybe Anthony Albanese, maybe One Nation, maybe the coalition should have thought about that before they backed in Donald Trump's bloody war. But anyhow, we're in this mess where we are. The Greens have always said that war would be a disaster for the country, and it bloody well is.
So let's talk about incentives for encouraging young Australians to pick up tools, if that's what they're good at. And how do we incentivise apprentice truckies so that they can continue to deliver our groceries?
I mean, this budget gives like $40 billion in tax concessions to the mining industry for diesel fuel rebates, right? $40 billion to the mining industry. Imagine if a tiny bit of that, imagine if 10% of that was actually said, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to say to every new apprentice, we're going to give you let's pick a figure, a $5,000 quarterly bonus if you stay in the job. You stay in the job, you keep your apprentice, you're doing well. Every 3 months, when when your employer says you're learning your tools, you're learning your trade, the Commonwealth government's going to give you a $5,000 tax-free bonus, because we bloody well want apprentices in, and we want to encourage them to stay. And when you complete your apprenticeship, we're going to give you a completion bonus and say, thanks very much, you can help build the country. I mean, why aren't we seeing that in the budget? Instead, we get $40 billion gifted to the likes of Gina Rinehart. Like, the money should go where it's needed to get apprentices, encourage them to get the skills to build the future we need.
How do we encourage young Aussies to get behind the wheel of a truck?
Well, I mean, it's a hard job, right? It's a bloody hard job.
It's hard on relationships.
Hard on families, you're constantly moving around.
And it's dangerous.
Well, it shouldn't be dangerous. And I'll tell you one thing we should do. And that's why I say the contract determinations in New South Wales, which actually limit the hours, ensure that there's a fair return on not just your wages, but also the capital that you've invested in your equipment, in your truck. That's the kind of system that we should see across the country, because otherwise we get these, the big transport companies, the likes and their customers, Coles and Woolworths and others, doing this race to the bottom for the trucking industry and having, independent contractors bid against each other in a downward spiral. We need some national standards. And part of that is OHS standards, so that no contract can see a truckie driving for dangerous hours because they have to, because otherwise they can't afford the fuel. I mean, it's about setting standards, tough standards that are in the interests of workplace safety and a fair return.
I'm worried that your bells are about to ring. I've got to ask you, relate to me your experience about being pulled over on the way to the annual Nimbin Mardi Gras. What happened?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if people know what the Nimbin Mardi Gras is. It's an annual festival to call for drug law reform so that we can legalize cannabis. And every year, Nimbin is surrounded by about 200 police. Every single entranceway has a team of 15 to 20 police, multiple police vehicles, drug testing units, and they're trying to catch anybody with the slightest trace of cannabis in their system because we have really cooked drug driving laws. The drug driving laws say that if you had a joint a week ago, no danger to driving. You had a joint a week ago and they test you and they can get the tiniest amount of cannabis in your system, they are going to give you a $1,500 fine and cancel your license on the spot. And that is crazy unfair.
How do you measure the amount? Measure the amount of what is it?
THC.
THC.
Yeah.
How do you measure the amount of THC in a joint? Because with alcohol we have 0.05, and some people are quite okay over that. Some people are not okay under that. But that's the line in the sand we have with alcohol.
Yeah, and it's called community support, right? Because people realize that. It's a kind of midway, As you point out, there are some people who might be moderately okay to drive.
Some people might be off their nut.
People accept it, right? They accept it. They accept it because it seems like a fair balance, right?
That's the standard, 0.05. Whether it be right or wrong, that's the standard.
Yeah, less for inexperienced drivers, Yeah.
Yeah. So we agree on that. So how do you measure what the standard is with marijuana and THC?
Well, we have a look at what the UK has done. The UK has an impairment level where they test the amount of THC in your system. And if you go above a certain level, the studies say that's impaired.
What's that level? I don't know. Educate me.
I can't recall the technical amount, but they test the amount of THC in your system. The same in many European countries, the same in Scandinavian countries. Even in the US, right, they have impairment tests where they get people to, either do a computer game or to walk the line. They have impairment-based tests in the US. But there are multiple options we can choose from that can actually test for impairment. Because I've got to tell you this, I 100%, the Greens 100% think that nobody should be on the roads who is impaired by drugs in any way, shape or form. And it should be a road safety thing. But at that same road safety test that I was stopped at, right, and they were testing for cannabis, somebody could have driven into that same road test, zonked to their eyeballs on prescription benzodiazepines, got completely out of it on a major, and the data says that's a major cause for road trauma. They could have stopped there, done the same test, zonked to their eyeballs on benzodiazepines. They would have been orally tested by the police. The police have a unit that could test for benzodiazepines, right? They could turn on this option to test for benzodiazepines, but they choose not to. And that person will just be waved through, right? Waved through that danger on the roads. Yet if somebody had followed me, and I saw plenty of cars stopped and it had been happening, people were losing their license, who'd had a joint 3 days ago, right? And the tiniest amount of cannabis in the system, no danger at all. They would have had the full weight of the law thrown at them. And, and the police do this aggressive policing around Nimbin as a provocation to the community. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent on it every year, knowing full well that, and you talk to police, and there are police who know that this is a dumb system. It's not just us who think it's a dumb system. Police know that they're taking the license from people who are no danger to the roads, and they know it's a dumb system. I would rather those police were out there actually doing real road safety or chasing down domestic violence, stopping women getting killed in this country, like doing the policing job I want them to do, not some kind of policing festival around Mardi Gras.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about other things, but I find this fascinating because I'm not a drug taker. I'm not a gambler either. Two vices I don't have.
Yeah, sensible look.
So I need education on this. So are you saying in Europe there is a device like a breathalyzer. You can blow into it and it measures your THC. Is that what?
Yeah, well, they have an oral test, the saliva test, and they test the level of THC in your system. And if you're above a certain level, you get whacked. If you're below a certain level and you're not a danger, well, they don't take your license off you. And it's a little bit complicated, Luke, because if you have cannabis and alcohol at the same time, well, all the evidence says that is particularly dangerous. So if there's any alcohol in your system, then you should absolutely have a zero for cannabis. Any cannabis in your system, you should have zero for alcohol. And we should be having drug testing laws that are actually based upon the data and road safety. And we don't. We've got drug policing. They're fighting the war on drugs dressed up as a road safety thing.
It's interesting. This is an interesting one. So do you think, because for professional drivers and P-platers and L-platers, it's zero alcohol, do you think every driver should be zero? Do you think we should not even tolerate 0.05?
I think we need laws that have social license, right? We have laws that people are willing to accept and they think they're fair. And the 0.05 thing, people accept, right? They think it's fair. They know if you've had 3 drinks in a row that you shouldn't get behind the wheel of a car. They know they know it's fair. I reckon our laws, yes, they need to absolutely follow the evidence. And there is good evidence about 0.05. Less if you're an inexperienced driver or a really young driver. Like, that's based on good evidence. And also it's got social acceptance. But the cannabis stuff, like, it is literally designed not for road safety. All the evidence says it's not about road safety. And the other thing I hear, Luke, is that because cannabis stays in your system for longer, that what we're seeing, particularly in regional parts of the country, is people, if they want to go out on a Friday night and they've got a job on Monday or they're going to be driving on Monday, that I'm hearing anecdotal reports, they're switching from cannabis to ice and meth, because meth gets washed through your system much more quickly and you're not going to be picked up when you're driving to work on Monday. And that, for me, is a crazy dangerous thing that's happening. Like, cannabis has some harm levels. I'm not pretending otherwise. But like, if people are substituting meth for cannabis because of roadside drug testing, because they're worried about this tiny residual trace on the money, that's bad, right? And I'm hearing that across the country.
You don't have to be a drug taker to be an expert, I guess, but maybe it helps you in your perspective. I don't know. You can tell me what you think.
Well, I don't take drugs. I'm a very clean living Greens Senator. You'd be pleased to know. Look, I'm not going to pretend I didn't. I went to university. I was a young person, but I'm a ridiculously clean living Greens Senator. Yeah.
But what did pot do for you?
It doesn't float my boat. It doesn't float my boat. I'll be quite frank.
Doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah, well, it doesn't float my boat. It's not my. I like, as I said, I take my job and as a lawmaker really seriously, right? And I may not like all the laws, but I try and I do my best to comply with them as a senator. But I think cannabis should be legal, and I think we should get it out of the hands of organised crime. We should get it out of the hands of some of the worst people in the country who are making billions and billions of dollars of profit, and we should make it a legitimate industry where we can ensure that we know what's the quantity of THC. We can ensure that it's not full of nasty chemicals. People can have a legitimate business and actually make a legitimate business out of it. And we can have a whole bunch of public health warnings. Why don't we legalize cannabis and have a win-win-win, I think?
Okay, I'm going to go sideways on you here, Senator. So the current tobacco wars going on in Australia at the moment, and every second day you'll hear of a tobacconist that's been firebombed, and it's run by crooks, it's run by organised crime. And my opinion is, if you have a substance that is highly addictive and you a huge excise or a tax on it, people will either give up or you will create a black market. And that's what's happening in Australia. And it seems to be proliferating. How would you fight the tobacco wars now and the black market tobacco that's on the market?
Well, I mean, first of all, police should be doing their job, right? I mean, what do we have police for? If there's organised crime out there, firebombing tobacconists, and it's a thing, right? I would rather police doing that, right, than surrounding Nimbin with 300 police doing the stupid drug driving. So I'd like police resources to be attacking and fighting organised crime and using the incredible amount of money and powers that they have to fight organised crime. And if they're unable to do that, the police should be explaining to us why, with all the money and all the powers they've got, they're unable to do that. But we should also look at some of the structures in the system that seem to be encouraging, massively rewarding the illegal tobacco industry. And I just saw a National Anti-Corruption Commission report that was published only recently. And what that said was that members of Australian Border Force, was set up by Peter Dutton, if you remember that Border Force. They'll wear the uniforms and, you meet them when you come into the airports. They were tracking the illegal tobacco flow coming into Australia, and they decided that they could actually make a killing and setting up their own business importing illegal tobacco from the information they'd gathered. And so they set up their own business, and a corrupt business, and they finally got caught for it. So, people observing it see that there are these obscene profits to be made, and we should be absolutely trying to work out how do we rebalance the system to ensure those obscene profits are not being made? So partly it's law enforcement, partly it's customers, but we should also look at the system.
Okay, but if you've got a product that's highly addictive and it's created this black market, which is very violent. I mean, once upon a time, you used to hear about tattoo parlours being firebombed by bikies, and now it's...
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, who the hell would want to rent a flat above a tobacconist? But anyway... Do you think the government should reduce the high taxes on cigarettes to try and wipe out this black market?
Well, I mean, I think we need to have this discussion with the public health experts who are telling us that, the tax system is a way of discouraging tobacco use. But I think one of the things we should be looking at, and you point out, tobacco is incredibly addictive, right? That if somebody wants to get nicotine patches, to get off tobacco, they can also be bloody expensive as well. Why isn't some of the tax excise that's coming on tobacco, the billions of dollars that's coming in tobacco, why isn't it making nicotine patches basically free? So that anybody who wants to can start getting themselves off one of the, as you point out, one of the nastiest addictions that there is on the planet. Like nicotine addiction is really a bloody brutal thing to work yourself off. So why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we exploring ways of helping people get away from the addiction and kill the market that way? So I'm open. The Greens are open to public health measures that do two things: reduce people's nicotine addiction, so that they can have more money for the things that they really need in their lives, disempowering organised crime. But also, I think, we should have a good hard look at the police. They have been given, in every state and territory, billions and billions of dollars of additional money, right? Incredibly intrusive powers. And now they're telling us that they can't stop firebombing. Like, I reckon we should. I know a lot of people like to sort of say, you can't criticise the police, you can't do this. And they've got a hard job, and I accept that, right? But this actually is their job. It is actually their job to catch these criminals, to break these criminal networks, and to keep us safe. And I reckon we should be asking, why are they instead doing things like surrounding,
innocent pot smokers at Nimbin?
I mean, everybody, right? Everybody gets stopped at that. Or I saw the other day, 7 police pulled over some bloke in Rose Bay in Sydney because he went to Bunnings wearing the scarf that they didn't like. They've got 7 police to go and surround some poor bugger who made the mistake of going to Bunnings wearing a keffiyeh. I want those police to be fighting organised crime, to be doing the job that I think they should be paid to do.
But just, I'll ask you again, do you think, would the Greens support a reduction in the cigarette excise?
Well, what I've tried to say is, what we need to do is we need to talk to the public health experts and be guided by the public health experts in that. And if they say to us that actually the excise is at a level that is actually encouraging nicotine use because it's creating this large, low-cost illegal market, and reducing the excise is a way of dealing with that, then we'll be guided by the public health experts. But, that's a conversation where, what I would urge you to do, Luke, is get some of those public health experts onto the show and have a chat with them and we should be doing this. We should be having these hard conversations.
You think cannabis should be legalised, and there's a lot of people who would agree with you. What do you think about the legalisation of all illicit drugs and regulating it? For example, you look at the pill. There's always debate going on about pill testing at dance raves and concerts and things like that. Ecstasy. But do you think all illicit drugs should be decriminalised and regulated?
Well, it's not Greens policy that all drugs should be legalised. We think cannabis should be legalised at a national level, and we should work out how to do that well, protect public safety, disempower organised crime, create new tax revenues. We should do that with cannabis, and we should do it as a priority with cannabis, because as you look at cannabis, it is very much at the lower end of the harm spectrum, not no harm, but at the lower end of the harm spectrum for drugs. But we should also be decriminalising, not putting people in jail because they have a small amount of drugs in their possession, a personal possession. Like, that is nuts that we're putting people in jail because they've got an addiction to a drug, right? They've got a health problem. They may have a social problem. But the idea that we're destroying people's lives and putting them in jail because they've got a personal possession of amount of drugs, that's cooked, right? And it's a waste of police resources. Again, I'd rather them fighting, organised crime than putting some poor bugger in jail because he's got, an ecstasy pill in his pocket or their pocket. So, we could save a huge amount of police resources by not putting everyone through the criminal justice system because of personal possession of drugs. We could redirect those police resources to fighting organised crime, and we should start having these kind of, hard but necessary conversations about, some of our laws are just cooked. And we should have a good hard look at them, Luke.
Senator Shoebridge, once again, you've given us something to think about, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, no worries, Luke. Good speaking.